Ellen White Miraculous Healing. The day God restored her strength. The year was 1845. The air in the small town of South Portland, Maine, carried the weight of sorrow and disappointment. Only a year earlier, thousands of believers had looked to the skies, expecting the glorious return of Christ. But the day passed and the heavens remained silent. Many lost their faith. Some abandoned prayer altogether. Yet in the midst of that disillusioned generation, a frail young woman named Ellen clung to hope with quiet determination. Since childhood, Ellen had lived in constant pain. When she was only 9 years old, a terrible accident changed her life forever. A stone thrown by a classmate struck her in the face, breaking her nose and leaving her gravely injured. For weeks, she drifted between life and death. When she finally recovered enough to stand, her body was weak, her breathing labored, and her strength nearly gone. Doctors told her family that she would never live a normal life. Every effort to regain her health failed. She was often too sick to attend school, too weak to walk without help, and too faint to speak for long periods. Yet even in her weakness, Ellen's heart burned with faith. She spent long hours in prayer, asking God not merely for healing but for purpose. The great disappointment of 1844 had left her heart heavy, but not broken. She was convinced that, somehow, God still had a plan, a purpose hidden beyond human sight. One chilly evening, Ellen attended a small prayer meeting at a friend's home. She was so weak that she had to be carried into the room and placed in a chair. Around her, a handful of believers gathered in humble faith. Their hearts were weary, but their prayers were sincere. The room was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, and as they began to sing, the atmosphere grew thick with reverence. As the prayers rose, something changed. Ellen later described feeling a warmth begin at the crown of her head and flow downward through her body like a gentle current of light. The weakness that had chained her for years began to melt away. Her chest expanded, she could breathe deeply, something she had not done in months. Her trembling hands grew steady. Strength, real and physical, surged through her frame. She opened her eyes, and to the amazement of those around her, she stood. It was as though the weight of all my illness had been lifted, she later wrote. The power of God came upon me, and I felt His strength as though it were fire in my bones. Those who witnessed the moment would never forget it. Tears flowed freely. Some fell to their knees in awe, while others simply stared in silent wonder. Ellen, who moments earlier could barely whisper, now spoke clearly and fervently, giving praise to God. Her pale face glowed with a radiant peace. From that night forward, her life changed. The young woman who had been confined by sickness began to travel, speak, and write. Though her body had once seemed frail beyond recovery, she now possessed an endurance that few could explain. She traveled across states by horse-drawn carriage, spoke for hours in freezing halls, and wrote through long nights with tireless devotion. Those who knew her were astonished that someone once so weak could now labor so continuously. Ellen never claimed the healing as her own triumph. She always pointed back to God as the source of her renewed strength. "My life," she would say, "was preserved for a reason. He raised me up to speak words of hope when hearts were broken, and to bear witness that His power is still among us." This miraculous moment was not just a healing of the body, it was a calling. It marked the beginning of her lifelong ministry, one that would take her across continents, inspire movements, and influence millions. For Ellen, that night in South Portland would forever remain the moment when weakness met divine power, and a frail girl rose to become a messenger of faith.